Hey guys, BJ back with an update on this month's balance patch. So we're going into September, and yeah, they've dropped the balance patch a little bit late this season, mainly I think because they had the Titus Space Marine 2 tie-in promotion going on in the first week of the season. I'm not a big fan of balance patches hitting mid-season, especially in this new ladder system, right? Because you've got to try to pick four factions and you're trying to build score over the season, and then obviously a balance patch can change everything. So it's led to a lot of people like holding off playing ranked on week one, stuff like that. So I'm not, hopefully going forward we can get that back on track. But let's have a look at the changes themselves. So essentially the Ultramarines, they really struggled last season. Having been the best faction the season before, obviously they got nerfed into the ground. Kind of tried to address the Ultramarines and power them up a little bit. So let's see what they've done. So the first thing is the battlefield supremacy. Obviously this went up from 3 to 5, which was a huge nerf last season. They've kind of backtracked on it a little bit, and kind of gone with the middle ground basically. So it's now going to be 4. I think that's a pretty good change. I still don't know whether... I'm not sure whether there's anything wrong with it at 3. But 4 seems to be a bit more in line with these types of cards that give a permanent reduction to value for the rest of the game. So those cards in other factions seem to be around the 40 cost. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that overall, I guess. It's definitely way better than being 5. 5 was too much. Forward deployment, I mean, this is like a bit of a non-change, really. It's a flank stratagem that isn't used, and now it's giving something +1/+1. I mean, if we look at let's just have a quick look at the card itself, because I think it's 2E, right? Yeah. So it's not bad. It's not bad now for 2. Like, we never see this played in Ultramarines, interestingly enough. This type of card is played a little bit in other factions. Sisters 1, for example. Even the GSC. Maybe we will see this. Maybe this is maybe it's time, because I really think Ultramarines are struggling, and maybe it is time to kind of give this a test and see how it works. I'm not sure what kind of build it would work in, but the +1/+1 permanent flank it's not bad for 2. It's just finding the right deck for it. So maybe that's a little bit better than I was kind of like originally thinking. Hellblaster, I mean, this is just a useless card, right? It's got 2 melee attack and 4 range, and they've just upped it to 5. It's still only got 4 health. It's not a good card. It's never going to be played. Gather the Company, another card that was never played. 6E to draw 3 cards. Now they're making it 5E. Will get played. I mean, you could argue that with obviously now you've got Titus, and Uriel's struggled a little bit as well with draw. Maybe you do run 1 just in those decks because you absolutely just need draw, but you're never going to run it obviously in Tigris or Calgar, for example, where they can just draw themselves. The Assault Centurion is probably the one change that I'm kind of curious about, because this card is pretty, this is a pretty nice card. It's always been like a sort of fun one, really. It's an 8-drop. It's this one here. It's the one that's Vanguard with 7 health and 2 armor. But yeah, going up to 5 range is actually quite nice. Means it can't be cheated quite so easily, and dealing 5 damage on the defense is respectable. So yeah, I'm keen to try this card. I don't think I'm going to be playing much Ultramarines this season, if I'm honest, because I still think they're the weakest faction. But I'm definitely keen to try that card. Yeah. Overall, Ultramarines, I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think they're going to be really weak this season. People will try vehicle decks, but a lot more got nerfed to the vehicles than just the supremacy, so I don't see that being too viable. Overall, I'm actually wondering whether something like my kind of big guys Ultramarine deck might actually be where it's at with Marines at the minute. Potentially with like a forward deployment put in there. Bit disappointing, Ultramarines are like flagship faction, and obviously we just had Titus released, and this doesn't really support him because faction's a bit dead, to be honest. Yeah, I think one thing that I would say as well is that I think I can kind of see what might be happening here. I mean, you know, EG probably haven't got tons of time to invest in the balance patch at the minute. They've been pretty quick with releasing things over the last couple of months, and obviously the Titus thing will have taken up some time. I think they're probably, if I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing that they're probably trying to, probably think they're listening to the community in the sense of, we've asked for them tonight not over nerf things and make minor tweaks and minor changes, which these are. They're minor tweaks, tinkering if you like. And the other piece of feedback that people have often given is that we want them to buff cards that aren't being used. And you can definitely see in this balance patch they are targeting some cards that just, I mean, Desolation, Gather the Company, Hellblast. These are forward deployment. These are cards that are just never used, right? So I think that feedback's been given a lot by all of us, that we want to see cards that aren't used buffed, and I think that's probably what they think they're taking on board here. But I still think that overall this is not going to move the needle at all for Ultramarines. Now the Black Legion's an interesting one because Warlord Galeron was struggling. He basically, as he stands, let's kind of take a quick look. So as he stands, the Litany of Despair says give vulnerable 1, cost 2 energy, give vulnerable 1 to an enemy. If the target dies, which is kind of like backlash, then you draw a card. The problem that Galeron had was that the rest of the faction is very based around dark packs, and he has no access to dark packs. Now, this change is quite a considerable one, because what they've done is they've changed it. Still 2 energy, but it's give vulnerable 2 instead of 1. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. Definitely makes Galeron way more able to kind of like dominate the board, being able to do that. And it now has changed the backlash ability. So instead of drawing a card, it's give a dark pack to a random enemy troop. I think that this is more fit. I mean, I personally love the idea of drawing. You don't really have that in Chaos, but I think this is more fitting with the Chaos faction, to be honest. I think this is a good change because, you know, you just, without dark packs and the shallow card pool right now, there's just nothing to do with Chaos. So this is much more fitting. I think Galeron's going to be played now. I think he is the second best Chaos Warlord now for sure, and it will be really, really interesting to see how he's played. I think people will try the control stuff again, but he actually might be better with a more aggro-y build with like low to the ground units, so that you can actually spend the 2 energy on Litany of Despair and then get those dark pack buffs off on your troops. So yeah, so watch out for Galeron. He's definitely going to be much more of a contender this season. Now the Adepta Sororitas, Junith has been really powerful recently. Finally, we had a Sisters Warlord that was good, so they've nerfed her Warlord ability a little bit. And honestly, I'm kind of glad they've targeted it. I'm not sure if it's the right fix, but the deploying 2 Battle Sisters is beyond busted. It's only because the rest of the faction is a bit underpowered that they get away with it. I mean, if the faction was on like the Ork faction power level, for example, I mean, deploying 2, this would be the most broken thing. Everyone would be complaining about it. So anyway, what they've basically done is increase the faith from 4 to 5 that's needed to actually create 2 sisters instead of 1. This is good because obviously the relic of St. Catherine gives you 4 faith, so it stops you like automatically getting the upgrade just from playing that 1 card, so you have got to work a bit harder. Interestingly, this is a bit of a buff to the starting defense card, right? Because that thing just gives you 1 faith for free, so between that and the relic you can still trigger this, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I still think Junith's going to be powerful, but this is definitely a positive change. Sautekh, Disruption Blades, yeah, this is a good change. Basically, they tweaked it last season, and the only thing that it did is make Scarabs busted, basically. So instead of being able to give all your Scarabs +2 melee attack, you can only give them +1 now. And what they've done instead is given this kind of extra buff if it's a destroyer, and that's kind of good because this is the one archetype they're trying to push and it's still not really there. And this is now a card that has obvious destroyer synergy if we ever get a destroyer deck. Yeah, that's a good change. The Goff Orks, they've made a change that they probably should have made a while ago to the Grizzled Scarboy. This is the armor that you put on your Warlord. It does exactly the same thing, guys. It's just it does +1 instead of +2 health for each damaged enemy. This is just toning down the kind of like health buff. The main reason for playing this is the armor. I think that's a sensible change. I think it doesn't do anything too drastic to the card, but I think that's a good change. Interesting ones now. We've got Tank Buster and Big Shooter Boy. So the Tank Buster, it says change the description. So it already had Blast 2, and it says deal 4 to a random enemy vehicle. So let's take a quick look at the Tank Buster. Now, the biggest problem for the Tank Buster, and actually the Big Shooter Boy, is that it's a 6-drop. And we've already got such competition in the Orc slot for 6-drops. We've got some of the best 6-drops in the game, right? In the Veteran Stormboy, the Squig Buggy. I actually think this card is not bad, especially in a control build now. So its stats are exactly as this, but it now deals 4 damage to an opponent that's a vehicle on rally. That's really good. Like rally effects that deal 4 damage. That's powerful stuff. You know, you can imagine with like Makari and Gazgul, that means you can remove something that's got 7 health just from attacking with your Warlord and dealing this rally damage. So yeah, I mean, if we, you know, most factions have some vehicles in there. I mean, Chaos don't really; they're a bit light. So if it's a Chaos meta, maybe not. You know, potentially you'll see like a one-of added into like a, I don't know, like a Gaz control or something. Just because it actually does do something on the turn, it comes down. But I honestly just think the biggest problem with this is I don't think it's going to get a slot in most builds because it's just not as good or as consistent as the other 6-drops that we mentioned that are really powerful. But I'm really happy about that change. I think that's a really good change, and I'd like to see more of those types of changes to cards that aren't played. The next one is the Big Shooter Boy, which has terrible stats. But what they've done with this is every time you attack with like mob, it's basically like the Shooter Boy, isn't it? But it's the big one, so it does 2 pings, whereas the Shooter Boy does 1 ping every time you attack. This guy does 2 pings. So yeah, maybe you could. I mean, is there a world where this becomes like the top end of a super fast aggro deck, right? Like just a kind of complete beatdown deck, and then you drop this guy down on 6 and rest of your board, if you've got board, like just basically finishes things off with mob abilities, potentially. Does it hit Warlord? Let's have a look. Yeah, deal 1 damage to 2 random enemies. Okay, so if there's only the Warlord on the board, it might still only do 1 damage. That's bad if that's true. But I could be wrong. It might do 2 damage. I kind of need to test how that works. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about how you think that interaction is going to work. But yeah, so the Big Shooter Boy, at least he's got a role now. Not going to be seen much, to be honest. But if we do get a sort of aggro beatdown Orc deck, then this could be a consideration card for that. Next up, we got the Gene Stealer Cults, and the Rampant Infestation is the only card they've chosen to touch. I kind of like this because it's a new faction, so you got to be careful about going in there with like a sledgehammer and just like over nerfing things. I actually, towards the end of the season, started to feel that the Gene Stealer Cults were not as bad as people were making out. There were basically 2 cards that could be touched. One was the Hybrid, and one was this Rampant Infestation. They've gone with the Rampant Infestation. They've done what I hoped they'd do, which is basically increase the cost from 6 to 7. This is a really reasonable change. It means that the combo deck still exists. It's still in the game. It's still very powerful, but it's a lot easier to handle now. The biggest difference for me is that things like Orks now can be played to get into that meta, because Orks can now Will of Gork, because this is now a turn later. It's coming down on E7, and obviously then on E8, Will of Gork can go off. So I feel like this is a really good change. It might need to change the hybrid if it's still dominant, but I think this is really positive, and I think it will impact the win rate a little bit as well. So yeah, overall, I would say this is a kind of fair to average kind of like balance patch. There's some nice tweaks, toning down the Scarab deck and the combo deck a little bit, and Galeron now entering the frame. And toning down Junith just a tiny bit as well. But other than that, not a lot's changed. So I'm looking forward to this season. I think it's going to be a slightly better meta than it was last season, which was okay, but I think it'll be slightly better. We've toning down those binary decks. But yeah, in terms of balance patches, I don't think people will be like massively thrilled about this, because I think people were hoping for a lot more investment. But at the same time, I think, you know, there's some non-changes in here and a few sensible changes. So yeah, that's my review of the balance patch. Feeling a bit hanging today, guys, so sorry if I was a bit waffly. Let me know in the comments what you think. Yeah, like the video, and if you enjoy the content, check out some of these videos as well. Alright guys, until the next time, take it easy.